stood at the graveside, numb. My wife had been gone for less than an hour. Her children, the same ones I'd helped raise, surrounded me. Then her eldest leaned in and whispered, "You don't need to come to the house after this. You were never family." The others nodded. Cold eyes. Final words. And they walked away. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. But inside, something snapped. The rain started falling, light at first, then harder. People began opening umbrellas, but I just stood there, watching the casket being lowered. Diane, my Diane, gone. And her children had just erased me from their lives like I never existed. Like the 14 years I spent loving their mother meant nothing. My hands shook as I gripped the single rose I'd brought. White, her favorite. I dropped it onto the casket and heard it land with a soft thud. Around me, people whispered condolences I couldn't hear. My ears were ringing with those words. You were never family. What they didn't know was, she left them a final message. The ride home from the funeral was silent. No calls, no check-ins, not even a thank you. That's when I replayed the last few months. Missed visits, dismissive attitudes. They were waiting for her to die, and I had been too blind to see it. I pulled into the driveway of the house Diane and I shared. Our house. The porch light flickered like it always did, and I remembered how she'd joke about fixing it tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. I sat in the car for 20 minutes, unable to move. My phone sat silent on the passenger seat. 3 stepchildren. Not one text. I thought about the hospital visits I made alone. The nights I held Diane's hand while she cried from pain. Where were they? Busy, they always said. We'll come next week. Next week became never. I was the one who sat through every doctor's appointment, memorized every medication schedule, learned how to operate the oxygen tank when she couldn't breathe. And now, I was nothing to them, just an obstacle they'd finally removed. My name is Franklin. I met Diane 14 years ago at a community garden event. She had 3 children from her first marriage, and a heart too kind for this world. I didn't try to replace their father. I just wanted to be a good man in their lives. I thought I had been. I thought I was. Diane was replanting tomatoes when I first saw her. Dirt on her knees, laughing at something her friend said. She looked up and our eyes met. Something clicked. We talked for hours that day about everything and nothing. She told me about her ex-husband who left when the kids were young. She told me she'd sworn off relationships. But something between us felt right. Her children were 9, 12, and 15 when we married. I understood they'd lost their father, even if he chose to leave. I never pushed. Never demanded they call me Dad. I just showed up. School plays, soccer games, late-night emergency room visits. I thought consistency would win them over. Didn't. But I kept trying anyway, because I loved their mother. They never called me Dad. Fine. But birthdays were forgotten, Father's Days ignored, and every family photo cropped me out. Diane saw it. I told her not to worry. They'll come around, I said. They didn't. I remember the first Father's Day after we married. I woke up expecting nothing, and that's exactly what I got. Diane made me breakfast and apologized for them. They're still adjusting, she said. But year 2 came, then 3, then 10. Adjusting takes time, but 14 years? Christmas photos were the worst. Diane would insist I be in them, but somehow the final versions they posted online had me mysteriously cut out. Just Diane and her 3 kids, smiling like a complete family. I was the ghost husband, the man who paid half the bills but didn't exist in their narrative. Diane would get angry. Why do you let them treat you this way? She'd ask. I'd shrug. I'm not their real father. I can't force them to love me. But deep down it hurt. Every single time. The diagnosis came fast. Stage 4. The kids visited once, maybe twice. I took care of everything. Meds, bills, hospice. They said they were busy. I believed them. Diane didn't. The doctor's words still echo in my head. I'm sorry, but the cancer has spread. We're looking at months, not years. Diane grabbed my hand so hard I thought she'd break my fingers. We cried together in that sterile office while a nurse quietly handed us pamphlets about end-of-life care. I called her children immediately. Your mom needs you, I said. Her oldest, Marcus, said he'd come by that weekend. He didn't. Her middle child, Shayna, promised to visit Tuesday. She canceled. The youngest, Troy, didn't even return my call. Meanwhile, I arranged everything. In-home nurses, pain management, a hospital bed in our living room because Diane wanted to see her garden through the window. The kids showed up twice in 6 months. Twice. They'd stay for 20 minutes, uncomfortable and distracted, then leave. Diane would cry after they left, and I'd hold her, helpless. One night, she said, "If something happens to me, don't let them steamroll you." I brushed it off. They'd never do that. She didn't laugh. You don't know them like I do, Franklin. I didn't. Not yet. We were sitting on the back porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Diane was wrapped in blankets despite the summer heat. The cancer had stolen her warmth. She stared at her garden, the roses she'd planted, the bird feeder I'd built, and she looked so small. "Promise me something," she whispered. I leaned closer. "Promise you won't let them erase you. You're my husband. You matter." I kissed her forehead and promised, even though I didn't fully understand what she meant. She squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left. "I've made arrangements," she said. "Just trust me." I thought she was talking about funeral plans. I had no idea she meant something far bigger, something that would change everything. The day after the funeral, I came home to find the locks changed. Diane's oldest son claimed it was for security. He smirked while handing me a box of my things. "It's not your house anymore," he said, but the deed said otherwise. I stood on my own porch, key in hand, staring at a lock that no longer recognized me. Marcus stood in the doorway with his arms crossed, blocking my entry. Behind him, I could see Shayna packing up Diane's jewelry. Troy was carrying out our photo albums. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. Marcus shrugged. "Mom's gone. We're handling her estate." I pulled out my phone and showed him the property deed. Both names. Joint tenancy. "This is my house too," I said. He barely glanced at it. "We'll see what the lawyer says," he replied, then shut the door in my face. I called the police. They said it was a civil matter. I'd have to go to court. I sat in my car, stunned, holding that box of my belongings. Inside was my toothbrush, some clothes, and a photo of Diane and me on our wedding day. 12 years missing, and suddenly, their deadbeat biological dad shows up. They embraced him like a war hero. He stood beside them, smiling like he had been the one who stood by Diane's side. I wanted to scream. His name was Carl. He'd abandoned them when they were babies, disappeared to who knows where, never paid a dime in child support. Diane raised those kids alone for years before I came along. And now, at the funeral reception I wasn't invited to, Carl showed up wearing a cheap suit and fake sympathy. I only knew because Diane's sister called me. "You need to know what's happening," she said, furious. She sent me photos. There was Carl hugging Marcus, Shayna crying on his shoulder, Troy shaking his hand like they were old friends. They were rewriting history, pretending he'd been there all along. "He's helping us sort out Mom's affairs," Marcus told people. Affairs. Like Diane was a business transaction. I felt sick. This man contributed nothing, suffered nothing, sacrificed nothing. And they welcomed him like royalty while I, who'd been there every single day, was erased. Diane's attorney called me that night. She made some changes to the will. Private changes. There's a recording too. She asked me not to mention it until they came for the inheritance. They were coming. The attorney's name was Ms. Patricia Henley. She'd handled Diane's affairs for 20 years. Her voice was calm but knowing. Franklin, Diane anticipated this. She knew exactly how her children would behave. She made preparations. My heart started pounding. "What kind of preparations?" I asked. "I can't disclose details yet," she said, "but there's a formal reading scheduled for next week. The children have already requested it. They're expecting a straightforward distribution. They have no idea what's waiting for them." She paused. "Diane loved you very much. She made sure you'd be protected. Just trust the process. I hung up feeling a strange mix of hope and dread. Diane had known. She'd seen through their fake smiles and empty promises. And she'd done something about it. Something they weren't expecting. They didn't even ask if I wanted to be there. They assumed I wouldn't be. But I showed up, sat beside the attorney, and watched their faces shift when they saw me holding Diane's locket. The reading was held at Ms. Henley's office downtown. I arrived 10 minutes early. The receptionist smiled warmly at me and offered coffee. "Mrs. Marshall spoke highly of you," she said softly. That almost broke me. When Marcus, Shayna, and Troy walked in, their faces went pale. They hadn't expected me. Carl was with them, dressed like he belonged. "What's he doing here?" Marcus demanded, pointing at me. Ms. Henley didn't flinch. "Mr. Franklin Marshall is Mrs. Marshall's legal spouse. He has every right to be present." I sat quietly, clutching the silver locket Diane wore every day. Inside were tiny photos of us on our wedding day. She'd pressed it into my hand the night before she died and whispered, "Keep this close." Now I understood why. The tension in that room was suffocating. The official will stated, certain accounts would go to the children. The house was held in joint tenancy with me. But then, the attorney cleared her throat and said, "There's an audio message Diane wanted played before anything is finalized." Ms. Henley read through the standard distributions first. Small savings accounts, some jewelry, a car. The children nodded, satisfied, already calculating their shares. Carl leaned back in his chair, smug. Then Ms. Henley paused and pulled out a small recording device. "Before we proceed to the larger assets," she said carefully, "Mrs. Marshall left specific instructions. She recorded a message 3 weeks before her passing. She was of sound mind, witnessed by 2 physicians and myself. She requested this be played in the presence of all beneficiaries." Marcus frowned. "Why? What's on it?" Ms. Henley looked at him evenly. "Your mother's final words to you." Shayna shifted uncomfortably. Troy glanced at Carl, who suddenly looked less confident. I sat perfectly still, heart hammering. Ms. Henley placed the recorder on the table. "Shall we begin?" They scoffed, laughed. One of them said, "She was probably drugged up." Then the attorney hit play, and Diane's voice filled the room. Clear, calm, final. "If you're hearing this," Diane's voice began, strong despite her illness, "then I'm gone. And if Franklin is sitting there being treated like an outsider, shame on you." The room went silent. You could hear breathing. Nothing else. Marcus's smirk vanished. Shayna's face went white. Troy stared at the recorder like it was a ghost. Carl straightened in his chair, suddenly very interested. I closed my eyes and let her voice wash over me. It was like she was in the room, alive, defending me one last time. "I know what you're thinking," Diane continued. "You're thinking this recording doesn't matter, that I was sick, confused, medicated. But I made this with my attorney present, fully aware, and legally binding. So listen carefully, because what I'm about to say will determine everything." Ms. Henley watched their faces with professional detachment. But I saw it, the tiniest hint of satisfaction in her eyes. "He was more of a father to you than the man who walked away. He's the one who carried me through every hard moment. And you chose not to see it." Diane's voice cracked slightly, emotion breaking through. "Franklin showed up. Every single day. Every doctor's appointment. Every sleepless night. He learned how to change my bandages, operate medical equipment, cook meals I could actually stomach. He held my hand when I was scared. He never once complained." She paused, and I heard her take a breath. "Your biological father abandoned you. Franklin chose you. He chose me. He chose this family. And how did you repay him? You cropped him out of photos, forgot his birthday, ignored him at holidays. You made him feel invisible." Marcus stood up. "This is ridiculous." Ms. Henley cut him off sharply. "Sit down. You'll hear the entire message." He sat, jaw clenched. "And when I got sick," Diane continued, "where were you? Busy. Always busy. But Franklin, he was there. every single moment. So before you claim your inheritance, know this, I saw everything. Diane listed every abandonment. Missed holidays, ignored calls, fake promises. Then, she paused and said, and if you're thinking about challenging this will, don't. Because I left proof. Her voice grew firmer, almost cold. Let me remind you, Christmas 2 years ago, none of you came. You said you'd visit. You didn't. Franklin cooked a full dinner and we ate alone. Last Thanksgiving? Marcus, you promised you'd bring the grandkids. You canceled 2 hours before. Shayna, you told me you'd come for my birthday. You sent a text instead. She went through a list. Methodical. Specific. Dates. Times. Broken promises. Each one was like a hammer blow. Shayna was crying now. Troy looked at the floor. Carl seemed frozen. Troy, when I called you from the hospital, terrified, you said you'd call back. You didn't. For 3 days. Franklin sat with me through every panic attack. Her voice softened. I forgave you every time. I made excuses. But I'm done protecting you from the truth. Then came the line that changed everything. And if you think you can fight this, think again. I documented everything. The attorney handed over an envelope of emails, screenshots, and legal documents Diane had collected. Their own words. Texts between the kids, mocking her illness, talking about what they'd take after she died. One read, once she's gone, we get rid of him. Ms. Henley slid a thick manila folder across the table. Your mother asked me to compile evidence of your behavior. This folder contains text message threads, emails, and social media posts, all legally obtained, all admissible in court should you choose to contest. Marcus grabbed the folder. His hands shook as he opened it. His face went from red to white in seconds. Shayna leaned over to look and gasped. There, printed in black and white, was a group chat between the three of them. Marcus. How much longer do we have to pretend to care? Shayna. Doctor said weeks. Just hold on. Troy. What about Franklin? Marcus. Once she's gone, we get rid of him. Change the locks. He's not blood. I watched them read their own cruelty. Watched realization dawn. They'd been caught. Diane had known everything. She'd been watching, collecting, preparing. And now their ugliness was undeniable. 3 weeks before her death, Diane signed a final amendment. It stripped them of access to her retirement accounts and stocks. Everything they assumed was theirs. Instead, it all went to a foundation. In her name. And I was named the trustee. Ms. Henley pulled out another document. 3 weeks before Mrs. Marshall passed, she executed an amendment to her will. Her retirement accounts, stock portfolio, and investment properties, totaling approximately $1.2 million, have been redirected. The room exploded. What? Marcus shouted. She can't do that. Ms. Henley remained calm. She absolutely could, and she did. The funds will establish the Diane Marshall Foundation, dedicated to supporting caregivers and hospice patients. Franklin will serve as trustee. Shayna was sobbing. Mom wouldn't do this. But Diane's voice came through the recorder again. I'm doing this because I love you. But love doesn't mean rewarding cruelty. Franklin gave me dignity in my final days. You gave me disappointment. Troy slammed his hand on the table. This is his fault. He manipulated her. Ms. Henley's expression hardened. Mr. Marshall had no knowledge of these changes until today. Mrs. Marshall made these decisions independently, with full legal counsel. Any attempt to claim undue influence will fail. Carl quietly stood and left. He wanted no part of a fight with no prize. They exploded. Screaming. Threats. One tried to storm out. But the attorney calmly said, You'll want to hear the rest. Because Diane wasn't finished yet. Marcus lunged toward me. You poisoned her against us. Ms. Henley stepped between us. Mr. Sullivan, sit down or I'll call security. He backed off, breathing hard. Shayna was still crying, mascara running. Troy looked shell-shocked. There's more, Ms. Henley said. Nobody wanted to hear more. But Diane's voice continued. I know you're angry. I know you think this is unfair. But let me tell you what's unfair. Unfair is spending your final months begging your children to visit. Unfair is dying while your kids argue over your jewelry in the next room. That hit Troy. He'd been in the hallway during one of Diane's final hospital stays, talking loudly on the phone about claiming her antique furniture. I'd heard him. Apparently so had Diane. "So yes," Diane said, "I'm leaving you something. I'm leaving you the truth. And I'm leaving you the consequences of your choices." She admitted her guilt. "I let you get away with too much because I loved you, but I can't reward cruelty. Not in death." And then she said it. "Franklin is my family. You just share my blood." Diane's voice softened, sadness replacing anger. "I failed you as a mother. I enabled your selfishness because I was afraid of losing you. But I lost you anyway, didn't I? You were already gone, just waiting for me to die so you could divide up my things." She took a shaky breath. "I wanted so badly for you to love Franklin. Not because he needed it, but because he deserved it. He's a good man. Better than I deserved. Better than you ever acknowledged." Then came the line that broke me. "Franklin is my family. You just share my blood. And there's a difference. Family shows up. Blood just expects inheritance." I felt tears roll down my face. Diane had seen me, really seen me, and she'd made sure they couldn't erase that. "I hope someday you understand what you lost," Diane finished. "Not the money. Him. You lost someone who would have loved you if you'd let him." The children tried to lawyer up, but the documents were airtight. Their father? He vanished again the moment it was clear there was nothing in it for him. They were left with nothing but shame. Marcus hired an attorney within 2 days. The lawyer reviewed everything and called him with bad news. "You have no case. The will is legally sound. Your mother was mentally competent. The evidence of your behavior is documented. If you proceed, you'll lose and pay court costs." Marcus tried anyway. He filed a contest claiming undue influence and diminished capacity. It was dismissed within 3 weeks. The judge reviewed Diane's medical records, the attorney's notes, and the physician testimonies. "Mrs. Marshall was clearly of sound mind," the judge stated. "Case dismissed." Shayna tried reaching out to me, sending texts. "Can we talk? I'm sorry. Please." I didn't respond. Troy sent one message. "You turned her against us." I blocked his number. Carl disappeared the day after the will reading. No goodbye. No support for his kids. Just like before. And this time, they finally understood what Diane had known all along. He'd never cared about them. Only money. Word got out. Family friends. Church members. Neighbors. People who used to praise them now looked away. They weren't the grieving children anymore. They were exposed. Diane's sister posted a vague but pointed message on social media. "Sometimes the people who cry the loudest at funerals cared the least while the person was alive." It got hundreds of likes. People who knew the family started connecting dots. Someone from Diane's church group commented, "I always wondered why Franklin was at every hospital visit alone." Another added, "I remember Diane mentioning she hadn't seen her kids in months." The narrative shifted. People started asking questions. Marcus's wife left him. She'd apparently been horrified by his behavior, and the will reading confirmed what she'd suspected. He was cruel. Shayna deactivated her social media after too many harsh comments. Troy moved to another state. At the grocery store, I'd see people who used to ignore me suddenly offer sympathetic smiles. "Diane was lucky to have you," they'd say. One of her old friends hugged me in the cereal aisle and whispered, "We all knew. We just didn't know how to help." I kept the house. Not out of spite, but because Diane and I built a life there. I planted her favorite flowers. Framed the last photo of us. Her children would never set foot inside again. The court finalized everything. The house was mine, free and clear. I walked through it slowly, touching things that still smelled like her. Her favorite blanket on the couch. Her coffee mug in the sink. I couldn't bring myself to wash it. I spent a weekend in the garden, planting white roses, her favorite. I built a small bench under the oak tree where we used to sit and watch sunsets. I hung bird feeders because she loved watching cardinals. Every corner of that house held memories. Good ones. I framed our last photo together. She was thin, frail, but smiling. Really smiling. It was taken by the hospice nurse 2 days before she died. We were holding hands. That photo now hangs in the living room, right where everyone can see it. The kids never came back. I changed the locks anyway, not out of fear but closure. This was my space now. Mine and Diane's. Sacred. Weeks later, I found a small box Diane hid in her closet. Letters addressed only to me. You deserved better. I hope this story gives you peace. I broke down for the first time. I was cleaning out her closet, donating clothes to charity, when I found it. A small wooden box tucked behind her shoes. Inside were letters. 5 of them, each in her handwriting, each addressed to me. The first one started, "My dearest Franklin, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry I couldn't stay." I sat on the closet floor and read them all. She thanked me for every small thing. Making her tea, rubbing her feet, reading to her when she couldn't sleep. One letter said, "You deserve children who loved you. I'm sorry mine didn't. But know this, you were the best father they never appreciated." Another, "Don't let them make you small. You are worthy. You are enough. You are everything." The last letter was simple. "Thank you for being my person. I love you. Forever. Diane." I sobbed. Deep, choking sobs. The kind that come from the very center of your soul. I mailed them each a copy of the recording. No note. No explanation. Just her voice. So that every time they tried to rewrite history, they'd hear the truth. I made 3 USB drives. Each contained the full recording, plus copies of the evidence Diane had collected. I mailed them in plain envelopes with no return address. Just their mother's voice, telling them exactly who they'd become. I imagined them receiving it, opening it, hearing her voice again. Would they cry? Feel remorse? Or would they just be angry? I didn't know. Didn't care. It wasn't about punishment. It was about truth. Diane's truth. And they needed to carry it. A week later, Shayna sent a message through Diane's sister. I listened. "I'm sorry. It was something. Not enough. But something." Marcus and Troy never responded. Maybe they never listened. Maybe they did and couldn't face it. Either way, they had it. Forever. No one could claim ignorance now. Her words existed. Documented. Undeniable. And they'd have to live with that. I launched the Diane Marshall Foundation in her name, focused on hospice support and caregiver advocacy. Every dollar she left now helps people who actually show up for their loved ones. The foundation officially opened 6 months after Diane's death. We funded respite care for exhausted caregivers. We provided financial assistance for hospice patients who couldn't afford medications. We created support groups for people caring for dying loved ones. Everything Diane would have wanted. Our first grant went to a man named Robert who'd been caring for his wife with ALS. He couldn't afford a night nurse and hadn't slept through the night in 8 months. We paid for 2 weeks of overnight care. He cried on the phone. "You have no idea what this means," he said. I did. I absolutely did. We helped dozens of families in that first year. Each one reminded me why Diane did what she did. Her money wasn't going to ungrateful children. It was going to people who understood love as action, not obligation. At the first annual fundraiser, I stood at the podium and said, "This foundation exists because my wife believed family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up." I never saw them again. No apologies. No letters. Nothing. But I didn't need it. I had peace. I had her voice reminding me, "You were always my family." And now, I live like she wanted me to, free, whole, and finally seen. Years have passed now. The house still feels like Diane's. I've kept everything exactly how she liked it. The foundation has grown, helping hundreds of families. I receive letters from strangers thanking me for giving them hope. That's Diane's legacy. Not bitterness. Hope. I still wear my wedding ring. People sometimes ask if I've thought about dating again. I smile and shake my head. I had my person. Some people get one great love in life. I got Diane. That's enough. Sometimes I sit in the garden at sunset, and I swear I can feel her there. The wind through the roses, the cardinals at the feeder. Her presence is everywhere. And I talk to her. I tell her about the foundation, about the people we've helped, about how her love still changes lives. Her children, I genuinely hope they found peace. I don't wish them harm, but I don't need their apology anymore. I have something better. I have the truth. I have her words. And I have the absolute certainty that I was loved. Completely. Unconditionally. Diane once told me, "You were always my family, Franklin. Always." And that's all I ever needed to hear.